Deborah, can you see if my MHEC logo is correct or is upside down?
Yes, sir. It
Looks all
looks
right?
fine. You're centered and the logo is very clear.
Good.
I can hear you well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming to office on a Friday when, we are on holiday. So thank you so much, Debbie.
Okay. I'm just going to mute myself now. So just to let you know, we're live streaming right now.
Thank you.
like to begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dr. Sanjay Rai. I am the Acting Secretary at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. We are delighted to have you all joining us virtually today. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment of silence to honor those who have served our great nation. As many of you know, today is Veterans Day. Let's recognize and honor their service before we start. Thank you. Thank you again to those men and women who have served this great nation. Maryland has a strong, comprehensive higher education system, including our great 16 community colleges, 30 plus private and independent four-year institutions, University System of Maryland, which comprises of 12 degree granting institutions, 3 regional higher education centers, and a major research and public service component. And our great state is home to 4 HBCUs. Every resident who's seeking opportunity for higher education, we want them to stay in our state of Maryland and take advantage of these great institutions and outstanding academic programs. Governor Moore's current budget is providing historic investments in higher education. For this current year, a record $393 million for Maryland local community colleges, $421 million in state support for Maryland's historically Black colleges and universities, amounting to a 19% increase. A 12% increase in funding for the University System of Maryland, and a record $112 million in funding for the Educational Excellence Award Program, the state's largest need-based student aid program, which is projected to serve more than 30,000 students in fiscal year 2024, administered by MHAC. The Maryland Higher Education Commission's purpose is not only regulatory oversight regarding academic programs, but MHAC's mission is to provide financial support to Maryland students and economic relief for those families who need assistance. We are mission-driven and singularly focused on meeting the needs of students across the state of Maryland. We are delighted to have Ms. Cassie Marrs, Chair of Maryland Higher Education Commission, with us today. Some of you know that Chair Marrs serves as the Executive Director of the College Bound Foundation. We are honored to have her today. Cassie.
Thank you, Dr. Rai, for the warm welcome, and good morning, everybody. I am honored to be chair of the Maryland Higher Education Commission and want to thank in advance my many colleagues at the agency, including Dr. Rai and Mr. Al Dorsett, who you'll hear from in a minute, for all their hard work in creating today's first ever statewide virtual financial aid open house. This financial aid season, MHEC is more committed than ever to being a student-focused state agency. Guided by the values of equity and transparency, we want to ensure that all Maryland students are aware of the millions of dollars of state aid for college that is available. And we want to cut the red tape and make state grants for college easy for students to access. Today, we will hear from Mr. Al Dorsett, who's the director of the Office of Student Financial Assistance at MHEC. He will kick us off with a 10-minute overview of the many programs that are available. And then we will spend the balance of the time answering the scores of questions that those of you in the audience have submitted over the past few weeks. We are very excited about this opportunity to be more transparent, to make the process less bureaucratic. And we have tried to organize the questions that you all have submitted by category, starting from the broad and moving to the more specific. This will be live recorded on YouTube, and the recording will be available on the MHEC website after today's presentation. In addition, the questions and answers will be posted on MHEC website. We also have an MHEC email address to which you can send questions throughout the financial aid season, and you can expect an answer from this agency and from Mr. Dorsett and his team to the website, to the email address that we'll provide you. You can expect an answer within 3 business days. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Al Dorsett, MHEC's Director of the Office of Student Financial Assistance, who will give us a 10-minute overview of the programs available this financial aid season.
Thank you, Chair Motz, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad to share more about MHEC's programs and the importance of the process to ensure students and their parents have financial tools necessary to succeed and explore and obtain their education. There are numerous scholarships and grants available which are administered by the Maryland Higher Education Commission. And if we could share a quick presentation to kind of go over those different programs. So we can move forward to slide 2. So Maryland Higher Education Commission administers numerous, almost 27 or more different financial assistance programs that we've categorized into different units. We have need-based programs such as the Educational Excellence Awards to Howard P. Rawlings, which includes the Guaranteed Access Grant up to $20,700 that a student can be awarded to pay tuition, fees, room, and board. The Educational Assistance Grant, which goes up to $3,000. And we have the Next Generation Scholarship GA Grant, which goes to students who have been pre-qualified during 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th grade to receive the GA grant. Students who are pre-qualified in 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th grade automatically become eligible for the GA program in their senior year of high school, as long as they meet all requirements, such as graduating from high school and participating part of their Next Generation program. Additionally, we have a 2+2 scholarship program for students who transfer from community college to a 4-year institution. Students usually apply for that in their last year of their community college when they're about to graduate. We have the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship, which is to all students enrolling to a community college, a last dollar award that helps cover the gap between any other grants they have and the difference with their tuition. The Near Completer program that we have for all students that have been out of school and are looking to come back to school. Additionally, we have decentralized programs in which the schools within Maryland actually manage those programs for students to participate in and push students to go and ask the different financial aid offices about these programs. If we can move on to the next slide. Other great opportunities, we have career-based scholarships, such as the non-resident nursing tuition reduction program for students that are out of state and want to be a nurse at a Maryland institution. They can get in-state tuition. The Teaching Fellows in Maryland Scholarship Program, and many others. And including also, we have programs for unique populations, such as our Delegate Scholarship and Centaural Scholarships, where students can write to their delegate or their senator to get certain scholarships, as well as our Edward T. Mary Conway Student Grant Program and G.B. Cryer Memorial Scholarship Program. If we can move on to the next slide. Also, for those students who have already graduated, we have loan assistant repayment programs, several different ones, for students who are working in different areas within Maryland and looking for assistance. You're already working, why not get assistance in paying back your student loans? So we can move on to the next slide. So some of these great programs that I mentioned real quick, the best way to really realize or kind of see about these programs and get in-depth information is to go to our MHEC website. Under our MHEC website, you'll see Need Money for College, Start Here. Click on there and it lists all our programs in detail, including the eligibility requirements and the process to apply for the program. Other resources for students is federalstudentaid.gov for students who need to complete the FAFSA or create a FSA ID or don't know how to complete the FAFSA. Many tools and resources there. And then other resources for external scholarships from private agencies. Scholly is a college scholarship app that is a free app and many use to look at all scholarships around the world. Next slide, please. Many impacts have happened on our programs that are great news for Maryland students. House Bill 923 was passed in 2023 legislation, which removed the GPA requirement for high school graduates. So it's before where students, before they could determine if they were eligible for the Howard P. Rawlings GA grant, they had to submit their first semester transcripts. They no longer will have to submit those transcripts. Additionally, the GED score requirement was pushed down to 145 per module, which is the passing score to pass the GED. The program also extended the age eligibility to the age of 26. So students who graduated from high school but chose not to go to school immediately have been out for 2 years, or even if a student decided, you know, I'm going away, but then the family decided we really can't afford this. Those students can still come back to a Maryland institution and may be eligible to receive one of the Howard P. Rawlings programs. Additionally, extends eligibility time for them to enroll in college for up to 6 years after graduating from high school or obtaining the GED. Also, the bill altered the criteria for a Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship. Students can now be part-time, minimum 6 credits, and still receive the Promise Scholarship. And this year, we've extended the deadline. So a student that is currently attending or plan to even attend this upcoming spring can still complete the FAFSA or the MISFA application and still be eligible to receive the Promise for the spring semester. Please move to the next slide. House Bill 982 established a great program, the pilot program for Human Services Career Scholarships, a program that moves in so many different directions because, one, Department of Human Services is working with our different high schools right now to set up with the local school systems different internships for targeted positions. With this program, once a student graduates from high school, they may obtain a job with the Department of Human Services. And if choose to, they can receive a scholarship for 100% of annual tuition and mandatory fees. It is a service obligation required with this, but of course, the student does have to work with the Department of Human Services. But imagine that the student graduates from high school, working with the Department of Human Services, getting that mentorship right there already in their career while they're going to school. It's a best of both worlds, really, because the student is receiving the career experience and assistance in paying for their education. Additionally, House Bill 1219 established a teacher development and retention program to provide support to eligible individuals interested in pursuing a career in teaching profession, beginning by offering eligible individuals a one-time stipend to just go into an experiential learning course. We are in the process of getting with the different institutions that are eligible so that they can promote that to their students, and students can receive a stipend to see if they're interested in a teaching career. Next slide, please. So, key things to kind of remember. One, we want students to create a MDCAPS. All high school seniors should be, even if you don't plan on staying in state. To me, you want to really create an idea of me as a customer. When I'm going to school, I'm looking for not only the best school I can attend, but what school is going to be affordable to me and my family. I've got to have all resources out there for me to really know what my options are. By creating that MDCAPS account and completing your FAFSA or MISFA, you're bringing into the system of what funds you may be eligible to receive if you attend American college. Move on to the next slide, please. For students that cannot complete a FAFSA, which are usually undocumented students, and here we have the criteria by the state legislation that makes a student eligible to receive, a undocumented student eligible to receive state aid. But the first thing we want students to do is create that MDCAPS account and complete the MISFA, the Maryland Student Financial Aid application, which is Maryland's comparison to the FAFSA, but it allows, again, undocumented students to apply for Maryland state aid. We can move forward, please. So, recommended next steps. Students and parents should set up their studentaid.gov accounts, create a separate username and password, FSA ID, for parents and the student. High school seniors, go and create that Maryland College Aid Processing Systems account, that MDCAPS account, and review MHEC financial assistance programs to see which programs you may be eligible for. I'll pass it over back to you, Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Dorset. A lot of great information there, and I wanted to highlight one item in particular, because when I shared this with my team at College Bound, there was a lot of cheering. Thanks to our partners in the General Assembly and the legislature, there is no longer a GPA requirement for the Guaranteed Access Grant. And as a reminder, the Guaranteed Access Grant at this point is a very large grant, not a loan, a grant that does not need to be repaid. It's over $20,000. It used to be that you needed a certain GPA, a 2.5 GPA, and a certain family income level. The GPA requirement has been eliminated. So there's no GPA requirement, but there still is the income requirement. So I just wanted to make sure, and the lot of information that you provided, Mr. Dorset, that people heard that one, because I do think it's a credit to the legislature for making that change, and I think it will have a huge impact on our state. You mentioned MDCAPS, which is the acronym for the College Aid Processing System, which is basically the online portal that students use to apply for state aid. So if you could, as we start with our general questions, somebody submitted a question with respect to the families in the audience, the families listening, and the counselors and the advisors who help them. Could you break down exactly how scholarships are awarded? Explain the process for when the student submits their documentation through MDCAPS, and then how it circulates through the system back into MHEC. And if you could please, I know you mentioned this, but reminder that it's very important to list a Maryland state school that you want to attend. Don't do that, you're not going to get this state money. So Mr. Dorset, if you could kind of walk us through the process.
Sure, no problem. So as you said, it's very important for a Maryland student as they complete their FAFSA especially, to make sure that they list a Maryland school on their account. The connection between the federal government and all states is that in order for a state agency such as MHEC to retrieve a student's free application for federal student aid, and students receive a SAR, a student aid report, after they complete a FAFSA, institutions in the state receive what we call an ISER, a institutional student information report. In order for us to receive that, an individual has to be a Maryland resident and list a Maryland school. So there have been situations where an individual as a Maryland resident completed the FAFSA, they may have not planned on going to school in state. They did not list any of the Maryland institutions on there, and unfortunately we did not receive their FAFSA in order to determine if they were eligible for any of our grants. In these cases, many students really looked at the cost with their families of what it cost to go out of state and realized it was more beneficial for them to stay in state. In some cases, we were able to catch the student because they went to the school and they let the student know that they needed to go back on the FAFSA and add an institution so that we can retrieve it. In other cases, unfortunately, the student may have missed the deadline because they waited too long and we had exhausted all funds at that point in time. So it's very important when you do that FAFSA, whether your dream is to go to a school in state or out of state, still put a Maryland institution because you want to know what your options really are. College is your consumer going to college. You really want to know what the different options are and what's going to be the best choice for you. Now, in regards to the process, once a student completes the FAFSA or MISFA, and we receive their application, the student is notified of any documents or required documents they need to submit through their MDCAPS system. They're sent an email indicating that we received their FAFSA. They're notified through email indicating to log into MDCAPS to see if there's any documents required that they need to submit. If the student has no documents required, then we award the student. If the student has required documents, then the student must submit those required documents for a specialist to review and just confirm that all information is correct to confirm eligibility for whichever award the student has applied. In this case, we'll focus on the Guaranteed Access Program. Once all documents are reviewed, the Financial Aid Office usually starts awarding I'd say the earliest we award based off legislation is April 15th. And once we do April 15th and start awarding, we continue to keep awarding students and notify students. Now, although we have awarded a student, the institution must confirm that the student is actually enrolled at the institution. So we have a certification process that we have with every institution in which they receive a roster of students that have indicated they are attending their school. The certification roster is usually open the first, second week of September because that's where schools need to confirm enrollment. Schools have different add and drop periods. You want to make sure that you don't confirm enrollment on a student, and then unfortunately, if something happens, the student has to drop all their courses, and you're getting a payment for a student who's no longer there. So usually it's that process of confirming enrollment first. Once the school confirms enrollment and certifies the student, we run a process on a weekly basis. So schools can certify and continue to certify students as they confirm enrollment and all other information. As they do that and do their payment process, the office also runs their payment process on a weekly basis. Once we run our payment process, our payments go to our finance division. Our finance division handles that payment process on a weekly basis as well. Now, the part that gets out of our control is all payments are paid through our comptroller's office, Maryland Comptroller's Office. Unfortunately, we have no control of how long it takes Maryland Comptroller's Office to process those payments. Maryland Comptroller's Office, once they process those payments, send those payments directly to the institution for the institution then to apply those funds for the student. So that's where it may take some time. We've told by the comptroller's office it may take sometimes up to 6 weeks before the school will receive that payment. Once the school receives that payment, it's an internal process with the institution that they apply those payments to the student's account. Schools have the choice to either apply those payments early and wait for the funds to be reimbursed to them through that payment process, or to wait for those actual funds to come in before they actually apply those payments to these students' account.
Right. So it's a complicated process. You mentioned the comptroller's office. Luckily, we have new leadership there, and I have a lot of confidence in the comptroller and her office, and we have a good relationship with them. So I think between the two agencies, MHEC and the comptroller's office, I think we should be in good shape. Again, cutting red tape for the students of the state of Maryland.
Can I make a point, Chair?
Of course.
With your permission. I think, Al, students who are eligible, let's say for Guaranteed Access Program, they receive a communication from your office that you're eligible. But from this year, because of good work that your office has done, school systems may be able to run a list of eligible students and contact students, or others who are helping students. They will be able to run a list and know which students are available for some of these programs.
Yes, so you're talking about our FAFSA completion initiative that we've been doing for a few years, but we've actually expanded that. Originally, the FAFSA completion initiative was where high schools, nonprofit organizations, LEAs had the ability to have a MDCAPS account in which they could import a list of students that were graduating, whether they got that list from the high school or it was the LEA. Once they imported that list into their system, they could export that list immediately out. That would identify of those students in their list what students have completed a FAFSA or a MISFA, what students were selected for verification, if documents need to be submitted, what documents need to be submitted, as well as you just said, if the student, based off the income information that was listed on the FAFSA or MISFA, determined that the student is eligible for a GA, EA program, or the Promise program if the student had listed a community college on their FAFSA. And that's key also to know, right? If a student does not list a community college on their FAFSA or indicate on their MISFA that they may be attending a community college, Promise would not show up as a potential award for the student. However, as long as the student lists at least one community college on their FAFSA or MISFA, it will still show the Promise. So I always tell individuals, when you're listing schools on your FAFSA, you definitely want to have at least one community college, at least one in-state institution, and then from there, choose how many other institutions you want. On the new FAFSA, I believe students can have up to 20 schools on their list, 20 schools on their FAFSA.
And just following up on Dr. Rye's question, the game changer this year is for the first time, the adults involved in this process, the counselors and the advisors, will have access to who's eligible for the Guaranteed Access Grant before the due date for the Guaranteed Access Grant. Is that right, Mr. Dorsett?
That is correct. So as soon as the FAFSA becomes available, and usually the FAFSA, we don't know right now.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. But for all of the counselors and advisors and teachers and mentors who are helping students fill out forms, I mean, I think this is as big a game change almost as the GPA requirement going away. This is for the first time, we're not waiting for students to log into MDCAPS and then students to receive an email, which they may or may not read, telling them that they're eligible for this $20,000 grant. We, the adults who are working with students, are going to be on a list that says, based on the income that's been reported on their FAFSA application, these students, and you're going to let us know before the deadline, these students are eligible for $20,000 so that the teachers and the counselors and the advisors can go to those students and say, check your email. There's an email from MDCAPS from MHEC. Fill this out and you can get $20,000 a year, $80,000 for the course of your college career. That is a game changer. And, congratulations, Dr. Ryan and Mr. Dorsett. That's huge to be able to roll that out statewide. I know you did a pilot program at College Bound. And we're so glad that we're able to do it for the entire city of Baltimore, and not just Baltimore, but all 24 local education agencies. So all jurisdictions are going to have access to this. So that's huge. And if I'm sure, Mr. Dorsett, you and your team will be in touch with the school system to make it clear how to access these lists.
Yes, we actually already have. We've had a joint meeting with Maryland Department of Education, where we had the different county board representatives and individuals and shared the information on the FCI. We told them how, if they don't have an account, how they can get an account. There's actually a web page, and even individuals can Google it saying Maryland or MHEC FCI FAFSA Completion Initiative, that breaks down what it is, what documents needed, so individuals can have an account. And like I said, as soon as the student does a FAFSA, they can go and plug that student's name on a roster sheet, upload it into the system, and then immediately export it from the system, and it will identify if that student's completed a FAFSA. So even, as you say, Chair Motz, if they have a student that there's no record for, they can even check with that student and say, hey, I see you haven't done your FAFSA yet. Go and do your FAFSA as soon as possible so that we can start moving forward on the process.
Excellent. This is great news. We're going to get to the FAFSA in a minute because I know there are a lot of questions about it, and I'm not saying we have the answers on what the federal government's going to do, but we do have a plan for Maryland. But before we get to that, one more general question. Dr. Ryan, maybe you could handle this. Who determines what scholarships and grants the state of Maryland offers?
So, as a state agency, all funding for scholarships and grant is provided by the state government. And the legislature is responsible for determining not only the scholarships and grants we provide, but the amount of money available for each financial aid program, as well as all the eligibility requirement. But having said that, let me say this, and especially to the parents in the audience. We have outstanding academic programs, outstanding academic institutions in the state of Maryland, number one. Number two, if you stay in the state of Maryland, you're not paying out of state tuition that you may pay if you choose to go outside the state of Maryland, right? And because of taxpayer support to higher education, our tuition in the state is already lower. And then you have access to all these wonderful scholarship programs that we are talking about today. So I would say, please think about staying in Maryland. You can have access to wonderful academic institutions, and you will graduate with credentials that will make you employable in the growing knowledge economy and all kinds of economy in our state, in our nation. And you will not have thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. So please consider Maryland. I have appointed myself as the chief recruiter of students for the state of Maryland. Please consider staying in Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Rai. All right, on to the FAFSA, which is, of course, the free application for federal student aid. It's the form that you fill out in order to get the federal Pell Grant. As many folks know, the federal government is making changes to the FAFSA. And so the FAFSA, which is normally rolled out on October 1st, has not yet been released by the federal government, this new form with the simplified form for the most part with fewer questions. We are hearing from the federal government that it should be released in December. However, as you've heard, we have some deadlines in Maryland. To get Maryland aid, you need to fill out your FAFSA with a Maryland school and a community college on it, ideally, by March 1st in order to qualify for Maryland state aid. So many of the questions that have come in from audience members are pertaining to what's going to happen if the feds keep pushing back the FAFSA release date. If it's not December, if it goes into January, are we still going to have this March 1st date in Maryland? Is it going to be cut too close for students? So, Mr. Dorsett, would you like to address that?
Sure. So the March 1st, as you indicated, Chair Mott, is a legislative deadline. So, of course, it would take legislation to change that deadline. But in the meantime, MHEC is working closely with our counselors and all of our financial aid leadership across the state to ensure that they're helping students create a studentaid.gov user account. Usually it was called an FSA ID. The federal government is transitioning to just call it a studentaid.gov account. So even today, we have a team at Montgomery County College giving a presentation to high school counselors and other leaders for higher education access. I'm going over different changes in the FAFSA that we've received from the federal government, showing them a prototype of how the FAFSA will look, urging them to create a FSA ID or studentaid.gov username and password so that they're prepared. The biggest thing is you don't want to wait until December. The federal government say the FAFSA is open and then everybody's running. Because remember, we're not talking about just Maryland. We're talking about across the whole United States. We don't want everybody just running and trying to do it at that point in time and having to wait the 3 days before they can actually go and do the FAFSA for them to authenticate the user. So to do it as early as possible, just going to studentaid.gov, creating an account, being prepared, knowing what that username and password is going to be, so that when that information comes out, hey, the FAFSA is available, all I have to do, whether it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, if I'm just up and I can't sleep, go in there and complete the FAFSA, click of buttons, and I'm done. And I know at least I've got my FAFSA in and I'm prepared as early as possible.
Okay, so you can create your account right now, and then as soon as it goes live from the federal government, you're ready. The other thing I would say is that our partners in the legislature are fantastic, and they're aware of this deadline and the March 1st deadline that would have to be changed by legislation. So on the off chance that the feds push it later, we will be partnering with our partners in the legislature to be able to extend that deadline if needed. We don't think we'll need to do that at this point, but we are ready to do so, and we're very grateful grateful for our legislative partners for being accommodating there. All right, Mr. Dorsett, you mentioned the MISFA, which is sometimes called Maryland's version of the FAFSA, although I think it's a little misleading because really the MISFA is for people who are not eligible for the FAFSA. Can you tell us a little bit about the MISFA and how eligible students can go about applying for that?
Sure. So in fiscal year 2022, the qualified children of undocumented immigrants who are eligible for in-state tuition are now eligible to apply for various state financial aid grants and scholarships. Knowing that those individuals could not apply for federal grants as an undocumented student, other states in Maryland pushed through to say, hey, let's create an application where individuals can at least apply for our in-state scholarships. So the biggest thing with that MISFA is really identifying, hey, do you meet the requirements for any of these scholarships? Now, as you said, you know, it kind of doesn't connect because it's more undocumented students. So one of the pushes within legislation and what MHEC is pushing for is also creating a MD1 app, which there will be a huge campaign as we move forward, which the MD1 app will be for all students and include a section in there for undocumented students to submit their information. But what's key about this now is not only will undocumented students be able to apply for our state grants that automatically just from doing that MISFA information, but they will be able to select other programs that they're interested in so that their information will see if they qualify for those other programs. So now instead of a student doing an application over here and an application over here, it's one application. It's a smart application that based off the answers to certain questions, other questions will populate or not populate based off those answers. So it's key to really do that MISFA or moving forward the MD1 app, put in that information to see what you qualify for, because you never know what you qualify for until you try. And if it's just doing that application, it's opening up opportunities that you may not even think about.
Okay. One question that we received from the audience relates to the MISFA and the timing of the MISFA's release. As we've discussed, we have no control over the federal government. Folks should be ready with their student aid, usernames, but we can't control when the FAFSA is released. However, the MISFA, which again is for undocumented students, if you can't get both, you either get the FAFSA or the MISFA. So one question is, would we make the MISFA application eligible, available earlier? And Mr. Dorsett, if you could answer that one and kind of explain the reasoning.
Sure. So as we said, we're in the process of updating that information as well as implementing that MISFA information into the MD1 app. But really what the key is that just like the FAFSA will calculate a SAI, a student aid index, to be fair to those undocumented students that can complete a MISFA, we want to make sure that an SAI is completed for them. So we're matching off the federal government and their calculations and what they're doing. So because the FAFSA is not available yet and all that information hasn't been really put in assurance right there of this is what it's going to be, here's it definitely, we have not opened up the MISFA yet. Once the FAFSA is fully defined, then we will open up the MISFA at the same time as the FAFSA.
Okay. Because really the MISFA determinations depends on the FAFSA, so we can't have the MISFA available earlier.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that folks in the audience, because we got that question more than once, and want to make sure folks understand that. So we are very much, as I mentioned at the top, trying to be as transparent as possible, and I think the MISFA can be confusing. We have updated our website as recently as this morning, I believe, with questions pertaining to the MISFA. So if you have additional questions about the MISFA, and again, that's the the acronym for the Maryland State Financial Aid Application. That is for undocumented students. Please go to our website, mhec.maryland.gov, and this will be up at the end of the presentation as well. And you'll see MISFA questions at the top of the page. Also, as I mentioned earlier, at the end, we will give you the email address that you can submit any questions throughout this financial aid season, and you will get a response from Mr. Dorsett and his team within 3 business days. I'd like to shift a little bit towards the FAFSA. And we've gotten some pretty specific questions from audience members about the FAFSA, again, with the caveat that we're not the federal government, so we don't control the FAFSA. But you, Al, I know you've been to lots of trainings about it, so you know a lot about it. Do you know whether this new FAFSA application will pre-populate like what is saved now in the FAFSA?
So the Department of Education Federal Student Aid, which is their office, has informed us that the 24-25 FAFSA will not pre-populate students' information due to the new authentication process. Because it's a whole new FAFSA, a whole new design, they weren't able to have that information pre-populate this year. However, any student that does the FAFSA this year for subsequent years will be able, or following years, the information will pre-populate in. So moving forward, a student will have to do the FAFSA once, putting in their own information. But once they do the FAFSA once, putting in their own information, that information will pre-populate as they move forward and update their FAFSA for the other years or moving forward.
Okay. We received a question from a student who's returning student after being out of college for some years. And the student writes, "Why is it so hard for me to start my application? I'm a returning student after years of being out of college."
So sometimes, you know, we definitely know, and I think the federal government knows, so both of us know that it can be difficult. Where do I start? Key points is, one, if it's the federal application, we want to tell students to visit www.studentaid.gov, which has a help center on there with tutorials and other tools to assist students in completing the FAFSA. Additionally, MHEC's webpage, mhec.maryland.gov, has many tools, including applying for financial aid to assist students and parents in completing the state aid application. So it's a lot of different resources out there. We know that it may be difficult, but we've put tools out there, and we just really want students to utilize those tools by going to that webpage and just clicking on a button, seeing the different tools, taking it step by step. It makes it easier. And again, with this MD1 app that we're implementing, individuals will be able to apply for all our programs, or which ones they select or are interested in, and be able to determine if they're going to be eligible from there.
Okay, great. A related question for students who may be returning to college after some years or going to college for the first time after high school. Question that we received: most financial aid information for higher education is targeted at parents and recent high school graduates. Is there a central place to find financial aid for adults over the age of 20?
So there's no central place to find financial aid for adults over the age of 26. I think we look at a lot of different information may mention the general students of high school students and their parents. But all financial aid can be eligible for students that are over the age of 26. If you look at our MHEC website and that need money for college, which is at the top of the page, once you click on that, it has all our programs. We have several programs that are for individuals doing undergrad, individuals doing grad, regardless of what the student's age is. So it's really just looking at those tools. Additionally, the FAFSA is not necessarily only for students that are under the age of 26. An adult student can still receive a Pell Grant or even a SEOG grant if the school has funds available just by doing the FAFSA. So again, the more that you look at these resources and utilize these tools and complete the FAFSA or MISFA, you're looking at what opportunities are available to me. And then once you do your application, there's more room for you to contact us, ask different questions, because we have your information now and can help assist in determining your eligibility.
Great. What are some ways that unofficial adult mentors can help students fill out their FAFSA? Is a question that we received.
So unofficial adult mentors can help students complete the FAFSA or MISFA by helping them interpret the questions and provide answers and information. Right? Depending on the student's situation, an unofficial adult mentor can advocate for the student to assist the student in obtaining information needed based on the student's particular circumstances. That mentor really has more knowledge, maybe, or expansion of resources to really understand what options the student has. So it's really being a guidance for that student. There are cases where a student doesn't have their parent, they have that unofficial adult mentor, that the student may need to become an independent student, but the student didn't go through the process of a system. That unofficial adult mentor can work with the school counselors. Usually schools will have where a student can do a dependency override, and the student will need 3 letters. So it's really helping the student, walking them through the process, helping the student look at what different resources out there are advocating for that student to assist them.
Okay, great. And is there help that we can give our counselors and advisors and mentors across the state?
So again, we're going out, we're doing the trainings with the train the trainer to help students, parents, hopefully that the school systems can have individuals that can walk them through the FAFSA, answer different questions. Of course, we have our website and individuals can contact us as well. Biggest thing that we look for is redeveloping our outreach program within MHEC, that we provide more online resources for individuals, more different programs or virtual resources for individuals that can answer those questions and assist those individuals. But the biggest thing, I think the biggest thing that we can do is create more advocates that understand the financial aid process. Not that they have to be professionals. That's our job. We don't want them to take those jobs away from us right there. But give them enough knowledge that they can help students navigate through the process, as well as help students understand what specific questions to ask or what specific answers they need.
Dr. Rye, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. It's all about collaboration and creating synergy, right? So since, I came into this role, as 5-6 months ago, I'm trying to visit every single campus of college or university in the state of Maryland. I have visited several already. And our effort is to be a more collaborative agency and not only support our institutions, but be a vehicle to increase information sharing, just as what we are doing today, right? This is first, but not the last, right? Ensure student success through ongoing collaborative communication and outreach efforts, visiting campuses, understanding things from their lens. They are at the grassroots level, what challenges they are facing, what ideas they have to improve the process at our agency, and how to support the students. And I'll end every question with this: support our students, keep our students in Maryland.
Great, thank you. All right, so we've talked a bit about the over $100 million of state aid that's available, and we've talked a little bit about how to access it. Let's take a minute to talk about eligibility. We actually did receive this question from the audience: what do I need to be eligible for financial aid? Mr. Dorsett?
So, that's a big question that everybody asks. And I try to get people to understand that financial aid is this big umbrella, which consists of many different areas. You have grants, you have scholarships, you have loans. Each of those have different requirements. So when you talk about what do I need to be eligible for financial aid, you need to know which financial aid pieces that you're actually applying for. If it's the Guaranteed Access Grant, if it's a Teaching Fellow Scholarship, if it's a Cybersecurity Scholarship, all of those have different requirements to determine eligibility. The best thing that I can tell individuals, one, at least for state aid, is to go to our website, mhec.maryland.gov, click on that Need Money for College, and look at those programs. because many students qualify for those programs that really don't apply. We do a detailed explanation within each program that explains the eligibility requirements and the application process for each different program. Only other thing I could say, really, what do I need to do, is do the FAFSA or do the MISFA. You got to do those first, do those, and that's half the battle for you, really, right there. So those are key things.
Sorry to interrupt. Speaking of the MISFA, did you say, did you give an exact date or time frame on when the MD1 portal is going to be open?
So we're pushing for December. Again, we don't know when the FAFSA is going to open. We're hoping that the FAFSA may open the first week of December. So our push, either way, is going to be the first week of December for that MD1 app.
Great. Okay. So back to eligibility. You're right. There are 27 different programs. They have different requirements. They're all set out on the website, and the website is helpfully in the background of the three speakers who you can see, mhec.maryland.gov. Thank you to Paris at MHEC for doing a great logo for us. Back to the Guaranteed Access Grant, which is the largest grant. It's over $20,000 this year. The eligibility requirement for that is that you have to be your family has to be at 130% of the federal poverty income level, correct?
Yes, yes.
And that it used to be there was a GPA requirement. Now there's no GPA requirement. So it's just that means tested 130% of the poverty level.
Yes.
Related question, because there's no GPA requirement, will the transcript requirement be removed for the GA grant since you don't need proof of GPA?
Yes, it will be removed from the GA requirement for the program. So
okay, that is huge.
Will not have to do that. Correct.
I mean, that has been a stumbling block, I think, for the many counselors and advisors across the state, hopefully who are tuning in and watching. That is a huge relief because it was a lot of work to do that. So thank you, MHEC, for taking off that piece of red tape, and thank you to the legislature for removing the GPA requirement. We're going to expand slightly to discuss the topic of verification. And those of us who are in this work every day would know what verification is, but for some of the students and families who may not be familiar with that term, Mr. Dorsett, could you start by just explaining what verification is and then describing any changes to verification this year?
Sure. So there's verification is what the federal government had created, which is basically institutions are responsible, and in some ways, MHEC, our state agency, has verification as well, in which there were certain elements on the FAFSA which needed to be verified just to confirm a student's eligibility. So GPA was verification, income requirements or income eligibility, making sure the household size and income, individuals providing us with a copy of their taxes were all pieces of verification. And once a individual is verified, then the individual is determined as eligible. There are times with verification where you realize that an individual did make a mistake on the FAFSA. Sometimes individuals go real fast. They put the parents' income information under the student section, put the student's income information under the parent section, or they use the wrong information. So verification has changed in many ways, not only with the federal government, but within MHEC as well. The federal government, because now they are doing an import of federal tax information directly into the FAFSA, they're hoping that will reduce verification as well as schools being required to receive a copy of the tax information. Or even with verification, if the individual transferred their tax information and makes no manual changes, then the schools will not be required to have an individual submit their tax information. With MHEC knowing this, MHEC is looking at the aspect of reducing our verification, where we only look to verify individuals that have done a manual change on their FAFSA. And that would only be, we're looking at 10 to 15% of individuals. So if 10% or 15% of individuals don't do a manual change, then individuals will not be selected for verification. But really looking at those individuals that may do a manual change from their tax information being imported, on their FAFSA to be the ones that may be selected for verification. The reason for that is if the federal government does not select them, we want to make sure that that manual change is a correct change. Now, if an individual does a manual change and the federal government selects them for verification for any reason, MHEC would not look to select them for verification. So we're reducing the amount of students that'll need to be verified, and it'll be based off if individuals make a manual change from the tax information that was imported into their FAFSA.
Great, another C change. So just to be clear, the default is you will not be verified. The only way that you would be verified is if you make a manual change on your FAFSA form, and even then, a small percentage of those who make a manual change will be verified. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's for MHEC, yes. The only
for MHEC. We can't control the federal government.
Correct.
They choose who they're going to verify, and they deal directly with the colleges on that.
Yes.
What I'm talking about, what we can control here in Maryland is our verification. The default is we're not verifying unless there's a manual change on the FAFSA, and then we're just, of that pool of those who've changed manually, we will be verifying 10 to 15%.
Yes.
Great. Again, congratulations, Dr. Rye and Mr. Dorsett, for making things more student-focused and just taking that red tape off. Dr. Rye, anything you wanted to add to this conversation?
I think very, very pleased with what we are doing today and in preparation for today. Removing the red tape, removing the bureaucracy. The idea is to have maximum possible financial aid available to our students, because we know financial barrier is one of the biggest barrier to access to higher education. So making financial aid available, but at the same time, how students receive the financial aid, making that process easier and more enjoyable for students. So students don't spend all energy in getting the financial aid. We want them to keep their energy so that when they get to their campuses in the state of Maryland, they spend energy on their classes, their homework, their exams, and other wonderful things that happens on the campus. And we want to take care of the rest for them.
Great. I'm going to change topics again. And go back to something we addressed earlier, which is MDCAPS, the Maryland College Aid Processing System, which is antiquated and is going to be replaced. Again, kudos to Dr. Rye and Mr. Dorsett. I believe the time frame is 18 months from now. We will have a full 21st century computer system, log-on system for students to apply for financial aid. But until then, we'll be working with the existing MDCAPS. So, Mr. Dorsett, I know that in the past, there have been hurdles for students working with MDCAPS, and they haven't filled out the paperwork on MDCAPS correctly, and that has kept students from getting thousands of dollars to which they'd be otherwise entitled. Can you talk about how we are trying to streamline that process and the importance of filling out the forms correctly, and any pitfalls that students and families and counselors should be looking at to make sure that they're doing everything they should be doing on the current MDCAPS system?
Yeah, so that is our MDCAPS is our central unit for processing students' financial assistance awards, communicating with the institutions of what students are eligible, and determining eligibility. As we deal with over 400,000 students each year, and we receive all these different applications, we need a system to be able to process this information because manually individuals would take forever to do it. So taking your time, it's just like the FAFSA. Taking your time to fill out the information correctly is necessary, because if we have a system set up that goes off of certain answers and certain processes, and the information is incorrect, then that system is going to read the information incorrectly and therefore do an incorrect process or determine the student possibly ineligible. Additionally, key thing with the FAFSA and MDCAPS is for students to use an email that they will use after high school, an email that they will use generally, an email that they're not going to forget the username and password, or they're not going to not look at, because as I said, the FAFSA sends you a student aid report. MDCAPS will send notification to the student if they've been selected for verification, if they've been awarded and they need to accept their awards. So it's very key that students provide the right and correct information. Even when we talk about the right and correct information, there's what we call a partial match to a full match. A student creates an MDCAPS account, and if that student uses a nickname or information that's not on their Social Security or different from their Social Security card, and then does the FAFSA, which requires them to have their legal name and information that's on their Social Security card, they'll have a partial match. We don't know that that individual is a partial match until somebody notifies us, indicating that we can go look at it, because again, we receive thousands and thousands of different FAFSA records from all residents within Maryland that put a Maryland institution. So it's key really that that student put or students put their information, put it an email that they use on a regular basis, and remember their username and password. They can access the account at all times. The student can see their award. They can see when their award's been certified. They can see if they need any documents. All communication is managed through there. So that's really key to understand how we utilize that information.
That's all very helpful information. Then what about the situation where the student jumps through all the hoops, fills in the information on MDCAPS, but then doesn't go back into MDCAPS to accept their award? What advice can you give students and families about that?
This is money. You know, if I sent you and said I've got $500,000 for you in a text message, you'd be clicking on the link in a minute. Although we may not see this money, this is money going towards your education. Your education helps you make money for the future, helps you succeed for the future. So this is really like gold to me. The idea of
reminding students to check their email. A lot of students don't, students text, they don't email as much. Check their email. They may not be familiar with MDCAPS or MHEC. And then I would think also what we talked about towards the beginning about having, for the first time ever, this list of eligible guaranteed access grant students eligible, having those lists of eligible students available to the adults who are working with students. So the adults can nudge the students and say, check your email. I think you're eligible for this. Make sure that, because you don't have much time between when MHEC tells you got the award and when you have to go in and accept it. It's just a few weeks, so that you really got to get in there and do it.
Yes, you get about 6 weeks, and again, because these are funds that we want to make sure every possible eligible student can receive. That's why that 6-week window is there, because if a student doesn't accept, then we look at, okay, what money do we have to award more students that weren't able to get awarded before? So that's why it's so key, like you said, to check your account on a regular basis, make sure you accept your award, make sure you put all the right and correct information.
One thing we might want to consider going forward as we change the MDCAPS, the system, and try to be more 21st century focused and meet our students where they are, we may want to consider in the future, not for this season, having some sort of text mechanism where we could notify students by text, because that really is the wave of the future.
And we already are. The new system we have, that is one of the biggest requirements within this new system, to be able to do text messages, to have multi-languages for individuals who, speak other languages or have another native language. So there's a lot of features as we move forward with wanting to build this new system that will make just the system in general more accessible to students.
Gotcha. And even maybe now, having, if a student supplies their cell phone number to MHEC, so opting in for MHEC updates. I don't know if there's a current way where you can say, all right, it's live now, check your email now, we're starting to award, just so that, that might not be as cumbersome as actually doing the awards, but just telling students who opt into the system by giving you their cell phone to be checking their email.
And we already do have that. So on
Great.
our MHAC webpage, students can go there. Students can sign up for notifications. I've done it myself. So definitely take that opportunity to sign up for notifications so you can get those text messages.
Great. Wonderful. That's right on the website. Very, very easy to find. Just you can opt in for MHAC MHAC updates. Wonderful. Okay. Great. We're about halfway through. I think that we've gotten lots of good questions. There are a couple of sort of nitty-gritty MDCAPS questions that I want to address just for the veterans in the field who took the time to submit questions. And one of the questions is, can you add a show password option on the MDCAPS login?
So we've taken that question into account. We have reached out to our systems team, and we are currently looking into the ability to do that.
Great. All right. So we'll be back in touch about that one.
Yes.
There have been a few questions that have been coming in during this presentation in the chat, and I wanted to address them. The first is, frankly, a question that's near and dear to my heart. So kudos to whoever asked this question. And the question is, can you explain why there is such a big disparity between the amount a student receives from the Guaranteed Access Grant versus the Education Assistance Grant? That's $20,000 versus $3,000. Why isn't there something in the middle? Excellent question. And I think something that bears further review, not this legislative session, but anyone who has ever had a conversation with me about MHAC knows I'm a big believer in trying to create a sliding scale so that if you miss out on the $20,000 Guaranteed Access Grant because your family makes $1 more than the income threshold, it shouldn't be that you go down to $3,000. There should be some sort of sliding scale, and other states have that as models. And that is certainly something that I think we as an agency will be looking to work with the legislature on, not for the upcoming legislative session, but perhaps the session after that. So very good question and something that we're aware of that needs improvement. Another question that came in related to the MISFA. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I speak on that?
Yes.
So, students who are receiving $20,000 now, I saw data, Chair Mart said one of the events at College Bound, their completion rate is very, very high, 71% or something like that, right?
73%, even during COVID. Yes.
73%. So yeah, thank you for correcting me. So,
well, just because I'm very proud, and a lot of my team members are on the call, so I know they would want me to talk about it.
So while we are completely in favor of looking at more, something in the middle, maybe 5,000, 6,000, but reducing the number of GAs that are awarded today at 20,000 level, I think having that at the same number, I think is important. We will require additional funding to do that, right? So maybe.
Yes. No, I'm not suggesting getting rid of the GA for the students who really have that financial need.
Yeah.
And it will require more funding. It's just, it's crazy to go from 20,000 to 3,000 if you're just off by a few dollars.
Yeah. So, so this is more, we need more funds to do that. And we will make a case in the next 20
Yes,
years.
yes, not for this legislative session, but that's definitely something that's on our mind as the proposed policy change. Of course, working in concert with the governor's office and the legislature, but it is a very good question.
Thank you.
We had another question that came in during this call about what about students who are documented, who are citizens, but their parents are not? Mr. Dorsett, do you want to address that?
So students who are documented, who are citizens, but their parents are not, can actually complete the FAFSA.
Okay.
Because they are citizens or eligible non-citizens. So even if it's not about that their parents are not documented, as long as they are, they still can complete the FAFSA. What the FAFSA will usually ask is that they provide parents' income, whether it's foreign income, and whatever they provide as indicating what that income is what that income is. So it's key right there. And actually, FAFSA has implemented where undocumented parents are now able to complete the FAFSA and has provided a lot of tutorials on how those parents would create, and even on the website studentaid.gov has tutorials of how those parents can create a FSA ID studentaid.gov username and password to sign the FAFSA.
Great. Another live question that's come in is, I have a 2-year degree and I'd like to get a 4-year degree. So what advice do you have?
Apply.
And how to pay for it, I think, is probably the question.
But again, that's apply. Do the FAFSA if you can do the FAFSA. If not, do the MISFA. As the MDCAPS One app comes out, or MD One app comes out, complete that. May depend on what program you're going for your bachelor's program. You may be going for cybersecurity, as I said. You may be going for teaching fellows. It's so many different ways that you may be eligible for aid. Let me say, through my years, and I have about 25 plus years of experience of financial aid, I've been at different states. Maryland is by far the state that has the most different programs and gives the most money to support its students. So the only thing stopping you is really you not applying, right? Apply to that school. If you're transferring this year, and if you're graduating or you're finishing or you just finished, you may apply for the 2+2. If not, and you missed the deadline, there's still the GA grant that if you never applied before, you may now be eligible for, depending on how old you are, right? If you're under the age of 26. If you're over the age of 26 and you're applying, there may be another program that you're eligible for. So the key piece to me is complete that FAFSA, create an MDCAPS account, apply for our different programs so we can tell you what you're eligible for, and look at our different programs to see your eligibility as well.
So
Did you want to add something, Dr. Rai?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm assuming you went to one of our 16 wonderful community colleges, and you made a good decision. Next decision, make sure you apply to one of the Maryland 4-year institution. Your community college has transfer counselors. Sit down with them. They will look at your academic program, and they will give you some really good advice to how to do the entire transfer process. Many 4-year institutions have special scholarships for transfer students. What comes to mind is Clark School of Engineering at University of Maryland. They have Clark Foundation scholarships, very generous scholarships. If you have 2-year degree in engineering, you're transferring there, is especially for those students. Generally speaking, when students transfer from community college to 4-year, the challenge is that the tuition goes up, right? Community colleges are much more affordable. So they face that challenge, right? Tuition goes up at least by 100%, if not more, depending on where you are going. So there are different scholarships available at different institutions. Some from MHAC, as Mr. Dorset was saying, you may be available for guaranteed access program, or some of the other scholarship program if you are going into the teaching profession or others. But this is an area of special interest for me. How to look at students in the large numbers who are going from 2-year to 4-year, and they're seeing this spike in tuition. Should we consider some other program for these students? And that's something we'll continue to research and think about how to do that. Great question.
Another live question relates to the FAFSA. We've been talking a lot about changes, but we haven't really gone into detail about the changes. Mr. Dorset, I know you've been to lots of trainings from the federal government. Could you just give us in broad brushstrokes what the major changes to the FAFSA are this year?
So major changes is the authentication process. In the past, the FAFSA, a student could complete it, and a student had their FSA ID, one application. If the student had their parents' FSA ID, they could sign it. They didn't have to. They could import information directly from the IRS, but they did not have to import information directly from the IRS. That authentication process is where the federal government has joined with the IRS, in which that authentication process allows the IRS automatically to import information into the FAFSA. So that's one of the biggest changes. Also, that it's sectioned off now. So now where it has it is the student initiates the FAFSA process. The student creates their account, goes in, they determine from the questions if the student lives with both their parents, if their parents are married, if their parents separated, who they live with, a whole lot of different questions there. Once they determine who the parent is and if the student is dependent or independent, they then ask the student to put in the parent's information and their email address that then communicates with the parent through email that this process has been started. The parent can click on there, sign in with their username and password to finish off the process. So the FAFSA now is not just completed in one time. Now it's different steps based off how many individuals need to sign and authenticate that information. Additionally, a parent can now initiate the process instead of the student, in which the parent can fill out their information and then tell the student, hey, I filled out my information, go ahead and put this other information here, where the student can then sign off on it. So it just allows more where it's a simple process and information is imported in to hopefully reduce the verification. Now, parents, it's no longer called parents. Parents are called contributors now. So those are key things that change right there. But those really are the key of how they set up for a student now to have a SAI, a student aid index, which can be anywhere from a -15 all the way up to the maximum Pell amount. And depending on what that SAI is, will determine how much of a Pell Award a student is eligible to receive.
The goal is to simplify it. I mean, there are fewer questions, correct,
Right.
in the new Pell than the new FAFSA.
Yes.
So, okay, and there are statewide trainings and more information on the FAFSA website if you want to. Whoever asked that question want to go directly to that. But good question.
I do tell individuals it's a public site. If you go into any search engine like Google and put Federal Student Aid FAFSA prototype, it'll give you a link. Basically, you copy the code on there, and as soon as you click on that link, you put that code in there, and it gives you their whole kind of map prototype. It's not a real FAFSA. It just gives people an idea of the feel of the FAFSA and what type of questions that it asks. So again, I tell individuals, FAFSA prototype, just put it in the search engine. It'll pop up for you immediately, give you directions of how to get into the prototype, and it really allows you to go through and get that feel.
Great. Also, keep in mind for the FAFSA, the first word in FAFSA is free. So you should never be paying someone to do the FAFSA. There are some scams out there. It's a completely free federal application. So just keep that in mind. A couple more live questions. Back to the $20,000 plus guaranteed access grant. The question from the audience member is, does it cover tuition fees and room and board? Mr. Dorsett. Yes, it does. And then the last live question is, is there state aid available through MDCAPS for students going to vocationals?
So there are several programs for students. It has to be a certified Maryland institution. So we have a list of all the certified Maryland institutions on our website if you want to look if that school fits under there. But there are several proprietary institutions which there's eligibility for a student to receive funds through.
Great. All right, and again, the MHEC administers the state financial aid. It's the legislature that decides what programs are available and what the eligibility requirements are. So we're trying to do as good a job as we can as in the executive branch of of giving out the money that the legislature has determined for programs that the legislature has determined.
And let me add some really new changes in that direction. The Promise Scholarship, that's I think about $20 million for community colleges. First, it was only for students pursuing credit programs, and initially started as full-time students, but now it's available to part-time students. It's a last dollar scholarship. But good news there is that it's also available now for apprenticeship programs. It's also available for all non-credit programs offered at community college. If you're doing an HVAC program, automotive programs in the non-credit side or credit side, you have access to Promise Scholarship as well. That's the change that our legislature made last year, I believe, and the significant improvement.
Great. Well, this is a really good segue into the next topic question that we received, and the topic is workforce development. So, Dr. Rai, before we get to the specific questions, I know you're working very hard to align higher education with workforce needs. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so first of all, I already started with the Promise Scholarship.
Yes.
Right? So Promise Scholarship is a huge change. It's eligible, is available, accessible for all non-credit programs offered at community colleges. We have more than 100,000 jobs open today in the state of Maryland, for which our employers cannot find talent. So we have a lot of these jobs are there where we have existing programs. Hundreds of HVAC jobs are open, and our community colleges have wonderful programs. And in many cases, local workforce development has money to support these programs. So the idea is getting the information out to the residents who can benefit from these good paying jobs, family sustaining jobs, to the existing programs. Number one, that is our serious equity agenda. We have well-paying jobs available in the state of Maryland. We want to make sure that every resident of Maryland has access to those jobs. That's number one. Number two, we are in the age of artificial intelligence, digital economy, where business and industry are changing at a much faster pace. We want to make sure that as higher education sector, we are able to keep up with that pace. So that's important. Working very hard to ensure that our institutions of higher education are fully prepared to get into this new emerging space of higher education. Changes in demography, changing in economy, whether it's artificial intelligence, other technologies that are impacting higher education. Certainly, globalization is another aspect that will continue to impact what we do, how we do. So in 2013, Maryland was one of the first state in the country to set a state completion goal. So at that time, a state goal was inspired by President Obama's completion agenda. And Maryland's goal was to have 55% by 2025. What it means is that 55% Marylanders will have at least an associate degree by 2025. So that's what we did, 10 years, 11 years ago. And now, at MHAC, we are trying to see where we are with this goal, and we are monitoring the progress. But at the same time, we have started thinking about how to set up goals for the next 10 years, looking at the challenges for our state today and the opportunities that are ahead of us. Whether there are workforce shortages in certain sectors of our existing service economy, or the emerging economy, thousands and thousands of jobs that will be there in 2030, they do not exist today, right? So how to think about academic programs and support to institutions of higher education to prepare our talent for the jobs that do not exist today, right? And then how to get the lead in translational research. So research that's coming out of our institutions of higher education, we are one of the best in the nation, 3-4 billions of dollars in research. How do we create more startups, more patents? How do we expand our economic base by the research that's coming out of our institutions? So if we have to set up goal today, should it be associate degrees or higher, or should we count all these certificates and other credentials that are directly applicable to our economy? What those certificates are, and how do we do a good accounting? How can we create 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 credentials of economic value, whether they are degree programs or certificate programs, non-credit programs, but they have an economic value in the sense that that lead to a family sustaining job, right?
Yep.
And can students get to those credentials without having debt? That's what we are talking here for the last 90 minutes, right?
Yes, indeed.
So not having a credential that does not lead to does not give an economic benefit to student or family, and at the same time, it leaves you with significant amount of debt. So how do we get to that? How can we be a talent-rich state, right? How can we become economically competitive in a way that equity is the foundation of that economic competitiveness? Every resident of Maryland has access to this good paying jobs. So those are some of the things that we'll be doing in the next 6 months or so, very statewide collaborative conversations with bold vision to make sure that higher education is leading the way in providing equity and economic competitiveness for the state.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. It's a wonderful vision. Mr. Dorset, can you give us a few more specifics about how MHEC is currently supporting students through specific workforce-related scholarships?
Sure. So programs like the Workforce Development Sequence Scholarship, we call WDSS for short, provides financial assistance for students enrolling in a registered apprenticeship program or approved non-credit licensure or certification program. The award amount is up to $2,000 to pay toward tuition, mandatory fees, or costs to participate in a registered apprenticeship program. Maryland residents or Maryland high school graduates may apply for the program. So these are great programs because these programs not only provide money, but they provide mentorship. They provide resources. The biggest thing that I see Maryland doing with our workforce development, which is great, such as the DHS, Department of Human Services Scholarship, is providing mentor and funds together to help mold individuals and help them prepare for the career base. Additionally, the Workforce Shortage Student Assistant Grant, what we call WSSAG for short, is for students who plan to work in a specific career occupational programs upon graduation. Eligible fields include childcare, human services, teaching, nursing, and when I say nursing, I like to be specific because it's nursing within mental health, physical and occupational therapy, social work, and public service. Recipients of this award are required to complete a service obligation after completing the degree program, in which the recipient must work in the field related to their degree program at an organization within Maryland. The time frame of service is dependent upon the program and the number of times the recipient receives the award. But again, the key piece right there are these are additional funds that any student can receive as long as the student is agreeing not to pay back the funds, but to work in that field in Maryland. So really, I'm agreeing to do what I plan to do anyway with those. It's really a benefit to the student and to Maryland. And for more information on those programs, I definitely tell individuals to go to MHEC's website, mhec.maryland.gov, and select that Need Money for College Start Here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of free money for college, particularly in one of these fields where we have a workforce shortage. I mean, as you said, childcare, human services, teaching, nurses, particularly mental health nurses, physical and occupational therapy, social work. There's even a public service scholarship. So really, go to that MHEC website, mhec.maryland.gov, click on Need Money for College, and you can see those specific fields, as well as the apprenticeship scholarship that Mr. Dorsett mentioned at the beginning. Nursing students in particular, I think there's a real workforce shortage there. Can you speak a little more specifically about that scholarship, Mr. Dorsett?
So that scholarship is for nursing students, like I said, for the one going into the mental health field, but that promotes money or provides money to students that are promising to work in that field. I know within Maryland, last time I heard there were about 60 different jobs within nursing that Maryland needed to fill. So it's a high need for nurses, a big push for it. Additionally, the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship helps with students going into nursing. And there is a nurse support program too. For more information, students can go to nursesupport.org. Again, nursesupport.org for more information on that. But nursing is key. The science field is key. And really, to me, the more that we establish these type of programs that give individuals a goal of where I'm going. There's a lot of different programs that give students money, and then they're looked at upon, is the student really completing, right? We give this student this money, but is the student completing? Well, this is in the general type of student or traditional type of student, an 18-year-old student that is moving forward that needs that climate, that support to move towards that goal. So more programs like this can help not only those students, but other students in focusing and moving forward.
Great. Another area of shortage, teachers. There's a very generous Teacher Fellows Scholarship. Can you speak to us a little bit about that, please?
So our Teaching Fellow Scholarship that pays 100% tuition and mandatory fees plus room and board for students attending a Maryland public institution. Or if a student is attending a private Maryland institution, it pays up to 50% of tuition, and it pays the room and board if they're staying on campus. Private institutions that participate actually match program funds. So it's a great program for individuals. Additionally, they've recent legislation, as I indicated earlier, has completed a new program for individuals interested in teaching, which gives them a stipend. But coming in the 26-27 academic year, based off legislation, there will be an internship stipend for teachers. That teachers that are in an internship program, and it will be a service obligation or career-based type program, but individuals can receive up to $20,000 while they're in their teaching program or internship program in a stipend to help them get through while they're in that program. So Maryland is definitely pushing to assist teachers. Even when we look at the Teaching Fellowship Scholarship, they removed the GPA requirement. Now a student just needs to have satisfactory academic progress within their institution. They removed the SAT, ACT, or GED requirement that individuals need to have. And they've actually opened it up to non-resident students now. So, I definitely tell our resident students, now it's a competition. You definitely want to apply for those programs because I'm sure individuals that are out of state of Maryland and want to be a teacher are definitely going to try to take advantage of that. And we recently reopened up the program early so that more individuals can apply for the program.
So it's open now?
Yes.
Great. All right. Switching topics. A lot of questions came in about the very relevant topic of student debt. Trillions of dollars in student debt across the country. MHEC has several programs that can benefit Maryland residents who are challenged by student loan debt. And one of those is the Student Loan Debt Relief Tax Credit Program that originated in 2017, passed by the legislature. It's a tax credit which you can claim on your Maryland income tax return when you file your taxes. Mr. Dorsett, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the student loan debt tax relief credit helps Maryland taxpayers free up funds that they would otherwise pay towards college loans. So they could use those funds for other things they need, such as some use it to help pay towards a house, right? They want to buy their first home. This helps them. So instead of having to pay toward their loans, they save some money and they can use that towards that. In order to apply for the tax credit program, Maryland residents must have graduated from an institution of higher education. It is a priority to individuals that have graduated from a institution of higher education within Maryland. The tax credit application process opens each year on July 1st, and we encourage students to apply, or individuals that have graduated to apply for the tax credit once they have graduated. Since the tax credit year 2023 application process closed on September 15th for this year, at this point in time, it's not open, but again, it runs and opens up July to September every year for individuals to apply to.
Great. We got a question from a member of the audience who said, many residents like myself have over $20,000 in student loan debt and still couldn't afford to graduate. What can I do?
$20,000 of debt and still have not graduated?
That was the question. Yeah.
So I always tell individuals, one, if you can finish and go back and complete your degree program, do that first. The first piece of it is, if you have federal loans, when you're in school, at least part-time, you can put those loans in deferment, especially if you have subsidized loans. So that means while you're going towards your degree, whatever loans you have are not accruing any type of interest. You're focusing on your degree program so that you can move forward. But additionally, for individuals that have not graduated yet, depending on what field you're working in, we do have loan assistance repayment programs that do not require you to have a degree, but push you to go and finish your degree program. So we have our loan assistance repayment programs for police officers, firefighters, nurses, nurse faculty, licensed clinical counselors, physical and occupational therapists, social workers, speech pathologists, teachers. Depending on what field you are, you may be able to participate in one of those programs so that you can focus on your degree, reduce your loan debt at the same point in time. It really depends on where you're working, what you're doing, that determines what options you have available for you while you have this debt.
Right. Dr. Ryder, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that what Al said is perfect in that case, depending on how close the student is from graduation and what is the academic major and other things. But I'll go back and say this, that be very cautious in your choice in higher education. As I said earlier, we have outstanding institutions, community colleges, state institutions, private within the state of Maryland. And all these wonderful financial aid programs are available. Make your choice carefully. When you start your academic program at an institution, take full advantage of advising, counseling, so that you're not switching majors several times. Make your decision carefully after talking to experts in the field. A lot of support is available at our institutions here. And again, stay in Maryland. This will help reduce the debt and at the same time, more ROI on your own investments here. Thank you.
Right. I'm going to go to a live audience question. There was a question about the timeline for decisions being made by MHEC. Mr. Dorsett, if you can sort of walk us through when students and families will know whether they got an award from MHEC so they can plan accordingly.
So for the guaranteed access grant, it's a beautiful thing at this point in time, right? Because we no longer require a GPA. So this means that now we have the ability to bring in a student's FAFSA once it becomes available. And really, unless that student has been selected for verification, we should be able to identify to that student within 1 to 2 weeks of their eligibility. Really, it's just bringing in the FAFSA now, the system really looking and reviewing at 130% and determining if that student is eligible for the GA. Students that are not eligible for the GA, the system will then review those individuals and determine if they're eligible for the EA program. So we're looking to push this turnaround time fast. I'd say moving forward, when I say 2 weeks, I want that to be the moving forward. Because this is a new FAFSA, at this point in time, we're still giving ourselves some time. So we're going to stay with the legislative deadline, which is April 15th. So within legislation, they have it, and if we can get it out earlier, we definitely will. But we just want to make sure everything's right with the FAFSA and the calculations. But legislation requires that we notify all students that may be eligible for the Howard P. Rawlings program by April 15th. And again, the push is to get it out a lot earlier. But then moving forward, the real big push as everything comes into custom is really when the FAFSA goes back to becoming available October 1st. Any student that does the FAFSA October 1st should get notification of potential eligibility for the GA or EA grant early as November even as we move forward. So it's a lot of different plans. It's a lot of different pushing out information. It definitely will be a campaign that we work to strategize to give out to the public to let them know what and how we will move forward.
Great. Another audience question related to those state student loan repayment programs we were talking about. Can you apply to more than one of them at the same time?
I will have to look into that because we've never had that situation before. Usually it's based off of occupation, and all those occupations are specific. So I'd have to look into that, and we can respond and follow up with the answer to that question as we publicize the answers to all questions. Great.
All right, we're going to go back to some more questions that were submitted in advance. There was a question about students getting Maryland state scholarships if the student's attending an out-of-state institution. That's pretty rare, but it does happen. Mr. Dorsett, can you explain a circumstance where a student would get Maryland state money to go to college outside of the state of Maryland?
Sure. So there are two main scholarships that allow a student, if approved, to receive the funds out of the state of Maryland. That is the delegate and senatorial scholarship. If a student is attending an institution out of state of Maryland in a program that is not offered at a Maryland institution, that student, what we call a unique major, that student may be approved to receive their scholarship at the institution out of the state of Maryland. What that individual does is there's a unique major application that opens up on our website. Usually it opens up, I want to say, as early as April and goes all the way to late July for students to complete. Our academic affairs department has individuals that review that to look at the student's major, make sure that that major is not offered within the state of Maryland. If that major is not offered within the state of Maryland, then they approve it, and then we let the delegate or senatorial scholarship, whichever one the student received, know that that student is eligible to receive those funds. It is key when students receive those funds that they need to notify their institutions because a lot of times what happens is we award the student the funds and the institution that is out of state never creates a MDCAPS account for them to certify the student's enrollment. So therefore, the student, even though they were awarded those funds, do not receive those funds because the institution does not certify the funds for us to send them to the student. Additionally, some institutions have identified that they will not accept funds from an out-of-state agency. So the student should also make sure that they are aware that that institution will actually accept those funds from a out-of-state agency.
Okay. You mentioned the delegate and senatorial scholarships as one example of state money going out of state. And we had a specific question about whether those scholarships are automatic after registering with MDCAPS and sort of how those scholarships work. So for those watching at home, could you explain what the delegate and senatorial scholarships are and then how they interface with MDCAPS?
Sure. So each senator within the different 47 districts within Maryland, as well as the 3 delegates, have scholarship funds that they can award to individuals within their districts. It's not automatically awarded from a student completing an MDCAPS account. The student does have to write their senator or delegates to apply for the scholarship. Some have a scholarship application. Some will require them to write an essay. Usually the delegate's office or senator's office will let the individual know what their application process is. We do have on our MHEC website for those scholarships, we list the different districts and what senators or delegates are connected to each different district. The senatorial scholarship is awarded. It's awarded for 4 years automatically. So the individual gets the award, they get it for 4 years. In some cases, the individual can get it for a 5th year, depending on what the individual situation is. The delegate scholarships are awarded on a yearly basis. So those individuals would have to apply every year for that delegate scholarship. Now, an individual can apply for all 3 delegate scholarships. So you have 3 delegates in your district, you can apply for all 3. If all 3 choose to give the individual a scholarship, then an individual can get all 3 of those scholarships.
Gotcha. Question relating to the loan assistance repayment programs that we were just talking about, and they're designated by fields: nurses, teachers, social workers, speech pathologists. Are those categories set by law, by statute, or are they set by MHEC?
So those are set by statute. Within
Okay.
statute, they identify each different field, which is really connected to being an underserved field as well. So statute kind of identifies those, sets the guidelines for MHEC to follow, and then MHEC works to make sure we follow those guidelines in taking in applications and determining who's eligible to receive those funds.
Right. So if audience members were interested in having their field that serves under-resourced communities be added, they could go to the legislature and suggest that the law be changed, and then MHEC would administer it.
Yes.
Great. Question that we received about FAFSA related to graduate students. Can graduate students apply for FAFSA?
Yes, graduate students can definitely apply for the FAFSA. It helps in many ways. One, unfortunately, the federal government only has where graduate students are eligible for federal loans. So, that is assistance, but many individuals don't want loans. Unfortunately, that's all the federal government offers. However, many institutions will use the FAFSA to determine need. So many graduate school programs have their own financial aid, whether they call them scholarships or however they want to call them, that they will use individuals' FAFSA to determine need. So, for instance, previously I worked at a medical school. Medical school, we had scholarships for certain students. Those scholarships were based off the student's need, which we utilized the FAFSA. So those medical students, even though they were only eligible for federal loans, still completed the FAFSA, and some of them received scholarships. In addition, a lot of our different programs that students may be eligible for, like we have a graduate and part-time scholarship program where we give institutions funds and they can give to different graduate students to use. So a lot of our scholarships will require a student to have a FAFSA on file, or a school needs the FAFSA on file to determine that graduate students need. So they still want to complete that FAFSA because it's not just about federal aid and I don't want loans, or I may not be interested in loans. I may be eligible for other programs based off me completing that FAFSA or MISFA.
Right. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to take a few more questions, and I do want to allow time to show our screen with all of the contact information, and we have a particular separate contact way to contact MHEC with questions about the MISFA, which again is the application for students who are undocumented, sort of the parallel to the FAFSA here at Maryland. So let's just take 2 more questions, and then we will go back to the screen for the close so that everybody can get that contact information. Question about the wait list. My understanding is in the past there was a wait list for students who were eligible for the Guaranteed Access Grant. Does MHEC plan to bring that wait list back?
So the wait list never left. We still have a wait list. We've just been fortunate enough to award 100% of the students within last year. I recently checked our wait list for this year, and the only students that were listed on there were students that unfortunately were missing documents, and we determined may not be eligible, but we are still looking into that, and it was only about 3 students when I recently checked. So we still do have a wait list. The wait list for the Guaranteed Access Grant is not based on priority. And really what happens is the way our system works is when students do their FAFSA, when we initially open, everyone's on the wait list. And then
okay, what about for the EA grant?
So the EA grant is a wait list where we have a priority of or ranking of the eligible students. So the EA, we still have a wait list. The wait list with the EA is based off what EFC right now or later on SAI we can go up to. Because the Guaranteed Access Grant and the EA grant are both shared from the Howard P. Rawlings Fund, and the Guaranteed Access Grant is the first initial award, and then the EA is following. We make sure we award all Guaranteed Access eligible students, initial and renewal students. When we have funds remaining, we see how much funds remaining, and we try to award up to the highest EFC that we can for EA students to receive an award. However, students on the wait list that we could not hit their EFC, so let's say we awarded up to a 5,000 EFC, expected family contribution. Well, students that have above a 5,000 EFC, anything 5,000 or higher, would be on the wait list. Unless we have funds available, we cannot award those students on the wait list. So those students are still on the wait list, but necessarily we may not have funds available. What we usually do with those students is if we do have funds that become available, we go out and award those additional students, notify those students, and notify the institutions that additional students have been awarded for those funds.
Okay, so you tell the students that they're on a wait list pending future funds.
Correct. Correct.
You don't say they're ineligible, you just say wait list.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, I think in years past you may have said ineligible. At least this gives students hope that they do meet the requirements if more funding becomes available.
Right, we're very careful on that because sometimes you can tell a individual, well, you're on a wait list pending funding, and an individual says, okay, well, hopefully we'll get this funding, and we don't know if we'll get the funding, and that individual never receives it. So we're very careful when we tell an individual, you are on a wait list at this point in time. We have not reached up to your EFC, your expected family contribution, and notify the student. If we do at some point in time, we will notify the individual because we don't want the student to depend on that funding.
For sure.
Being
yes.
there on that week.
Absolutely. All right. The last question is a specific question related to legal guardianship and foster care. Does that affect Guaranteed Access Grant availability?
So it doesn't affect Guaranteed Access Grant availability, but it may affect how much a student will receive in the Guaranteed Access Grant. And what I mean by that is students that are in foster care ultimately, based off legislation, each institution waives their tuition and all other costs right there. The Guaranteed Access Grant is not a grant for a student to receive a refund from. So if a student is a foster care or homeless student and receives that waiver and all costs have been paid, although it doesn't change that student's eligibility, that student doesn't have an amount to be paid towards because they no longer have a bill. Now, if a student still has a bill and that bill is over the threshold within legislation, which I believe is $400 for them to receive the Guaranteed Access Grant or the EA grant, then that amount of funds that the student still needs will be paid towards their account. But if the student has no bill, then they're eligible for the grant, but they're not eligible for the actual funding because there's no cost to that student right now. So when we really look at these state grants, it's key to understand that legislation is pushing that students have access to education and have funds to pay their education, not to get a refund from resources that are available to them. And that's really kind of where sometimes students are kind of concerned or questioned because they say, well, I'm eligible for this award. How come I'm not getting this money? Well, the school certified that you have the homeless waiver. There's no bill for you. Therefore, there's no funds that we can pay.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to the final screen, I just wanted to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank Mr. Dorsett and Dr. Rye and all of the hardworking men and women of the Maryland Higher Education Commission. It's a very hardworking group. Rhonda Wardlaw behind the scenes making this happen, and so many other folks at MHEC. And this is actually a state holiday, which I didn't realize when we scheduled this. So they are actually working on a state holiday, the commemoration of Veterans Day, which of course is tomorrow, November 11th, but the commemoration is today. And also for those who are working at MHEC, responding to the many questions of the students and families of Maryland. Thank you for all you do. They're not, we're trying to get MHEC more resources in terms of more people and also more 21st century technology to really meet the needs of the students and families of Maryland to be more student focused. But it's a very, it can be a challenging job. And I just wanted to say, as a former state employee myself, I very much appreciate all of the work of the MHEC team. I'd like to end by turning it over to Dr. Rye and Mr. Dorsett for any final comments, and then we will put up on the screen the contact information. And again, you can expect a response either to the general email inquiry box or there's a specific MISFA email inquiry box. You can expect a response within 3 business days. But Dr. Rye, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Martz. I also want to add my thanks to everyone in the audience. They are in the audience, and I hope they will take this information and help students. I also want to add all my colleagues at MHEC. Chair Martz, we want to thank you. You have a volunteer job, and for the last 5-6 months, I think you're working almost full time with us. We really appreciate your expertise, your time, your guidance to all of us. Now we are looking forward to getting a lot of applications for financial aids. We want to make sure that the students who can benefit from these resources get these resources as soon as possible. Thank you again.
Mr. Dorsett, any closing remarks? You are the man of the hour, the expert.
Now, I definitely would like to share that last slide that we talked about, giving the MISFA questions as well as the GA email. So if we could share that last slide. And then thank you, Chair Motz. Thank you, Secretary Rye, just for the support. Thank all my colleagues. And really to the parents and students, I'm sure you still have thousands or hundreds of questions. Definitely take advantage of the resources we've provided you. Look at our website, go through our website, really determine what specific questions you have so we can help you as efficient as possible. Reach out to us. As a preparation, go create that FSA ID, create that MDCAPS account, and we look forward to serving you and helping you. We look forward to helping you expand your education in your future. And thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.